Sorry, Carlton King, the former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show which shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and of course, geopolitics, because many of our guests have not been in the secret intelligence world. However, today our guest is. He writes extensively around this particular area and where that fits and touches with geopolitics. We're talking about the one and only Mr. Andrew Lownie, the world's #1 literary agent, publisher, author. I could keep going on, but I won't. We've got him back again, and that's a difficult thing to do, but we've managed it. And we're going to hit basically where we cut off originally. And Andrew's going to tell us about how it went with his book, The Mountbattens, Their Life and Loves, because he had a court case. So, Andrew, welcome.
Welcome. Very good to be back on the show. Well, we did indeed have our hearing in November after we spoke. This hearing was brought about because in 2019, the Information Commissioner had ruled that the Mountbatten private diaries and letters, which I'd been fighting to get access to, should be made available. They had been bought by public funds for close to £3 million in lieu of tax, but had been basically closed without any good reason by Southampton University. Southampton and the Cabinet Office, who somehow muscled in on this, then challenged the ICO decision, and I was linked in this appeal against the ICO. Now, it took 2 years for this hearing to come through. By November 2021, in fact, Southampton had released 99% of the material, 30,000 pages of these diaries and letters, an invaluable historical source, but actually with nothing sensitive in them. So it's very difficult to understand why they'd closed them in 2010 when they were bought, and why they had resisted my attempts to have them opened. And why, of course, they spent so much taxpayers' money doing this. I think if my costs came to £370,000, and I'm crowdfunding at the moment to cover those costs, legal costs, through Crowd Justice, their costs with two top QCs must have come to well over £1 million. So that's the real scandal. They've refused in parliamentary questions to answer what those costs were. But in effect, we won the case. There were about 100 actions that they wanted to remain, very minor ones, but rather infuriating. One was a reference in Edwina's diary to Jinnah, the Pakistan leader, as a psychopath. There have been plenty of references like that in the public domain in her diaries, published diaries. So this seemed a bit ridiculous, but they claimed this would damage Anglo-Pakistan relations. They also closed under national security something called P Division, which was an intelligence operation during the Second World War, which has been widely written about, and in fact is available on the Mountbatten database, and some references to the Queen. Now, I put in a claim for my costs because clearly this material should never have been closed. It was bought with public funds to be open. And it was indeed released, more or less released, by the time I came to the hearing. So I'm not quite sure why they pursued it. But I'm afraid the judge dismissed my claim for costs, which is why I'm having to do this crowd justice attempt now to get the money. But the exciting thing is that we discovered that the correspondence between Edwina and Nehru, her lover, was bought under the same purchase agreement in 2011. And at any time since 2016, it could have been released on payment of £100. And I think the big question is, why haven't Southampton paid that £100 to release, again, this very important historical source?
Right. So you haven't got access to that yet, then?
So no one has got access to this Nehru Edwina correspondence. Some of it was quoted in the official lives of Edwina and Dickie 40 years ago. I've moved on from the Mountbattens, but I've done this really because I think there are important principles of academic freedom and access to archives, and that we shouldn't censor our past. But if this material is released, it will, of course, be very useful particularly for historians of Indian independence, of course, which we've got the 75th anniversary in August.
Yeah.
So the fight goes on. And meanwhile, I published a book called Traitor King, which accuses Edward VIII of being a Nazi sympathizer, which is just had a documentary on Channel 4 go out. And has had quite a lot of coverage. I mean, really shocking revelations about him saying to the Germans that the best way to subjugate Britain would be to bomb it. And this is all backed up with documentation from captured German documents and indeed from diaries at the time, particularly the diary of the King's private secretary, Alan Lascelles, and an MI5 officer who you'll know called Guy Liddell.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting with both of these books, to be fair, is, number one, are you sure you have actually got all of the information that is available in the Mountbatten Papers? Because why would it be so hardly fought over?
Well, I think the problem was that they told a series of lies. Basically, they couldn't be bothered to open these papers and to review them. And then most people were panned off quite easily, but I persevered. And having told me this lie, that it was closed under what they call a ministerial direction, the ministerial direction that they couldn't provide evidence of, and in which had no relevance to this whatsoever, and they dropped it in the case. So the Cabinet Office shouldn't really be involved in this case at all anyway. They were forced to carry on. It was a face-saving exercise. And I think that's why they fought it, but a complete waste of public funds. But you're right, there is still material kept back by the Mountbatten family, which I think could shed new light. I mean, there have been stories that I picked up in Russia that Mountbatten had been a Russian agent called Admiral, blackmailed over his paedophile activities. Now, I found nothing to verify that, so I haven't been able to use that.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the cover-ups go on. There was an incredible cover-up on the Duke of Windsor, in that they tried to suppress these captured German documents and indeed to destroy them. And you will be aware from your own career of how important documents are not put into public archives as they are required by law, but are often, with no good reason, are destroyed. And this, I think, is very sad because it means that we don't get a completely accurate view of our history.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is that you basically fought this battle not to get information for your book, because you already had it out there, but to get information or to make information available to others. But that seems very costly, though, Andrew.
Well, I'd hoped I'd got my costs, so I hope it, I was happy to put the work in. If I didn't go, it wasn't out of pocket, but the judge, for whatever reason, dismissed my costs, even though they are being incredibly unreasonable in their behaviour. In fact, the Information Commissioner had put contempt of court proceedings against the Cabinet Office and Southampton for failure to respond to him. And 8 times I had to get an information notice for them to answer. So their behaviour was completely unreasonable, which are the grounds that you should get your costs.
Yeah.
But I'm glad, I'm going to somehow have to find this money. But at least the material is available, and I think an important stand has been made about the principle that the government should not be abusing its power. And it's part of a wider debate that's going on at the moment about the lack of transparency in government. And frankly, the way that, we've had an ethics advisor resign in the last week, the way that they behave. And they don't feel the rules apply to them, that they can do what they want. But I think this is very worrying for democracy and for trust in government.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that the problem is that, unlike yourself, I don't really see things changing, because I don't think there's demand from the public. It's quite interesting if we just touch a little bit offside, but the same area, actually, is the fact of the situation right now of our Prime Minister. Now, there are many things that the Prime Minister's done which is not correct, but I hear from many, many ordinary members of the public, he's doing a great job. He, for many, it's Brexit. He got us out of the EU. He got us over COVID. When we both know we can look at both of those aspects that have been mentioned by many, and we can say that the UK didn't do particularly well. Well, absolutely poorly in terms of Brexit, but not particularly well in terms of the virus either, with the amount of deaths that we had, and also the way it was handled, and the loss of money.
I mean, whatever one's views of the Prime Minister and successors on Brexit or Ukraine or whatever it is, I think this, and it's not just this Prime Minister, it goes back some time. I think it is pretty shocking that these documents are destroyed without records being kept. The cover-ups go on of often things which are just politically embarrassing rather than anything to do with national security. Yeah. And that we have a culture of secrecy in this country, which is really shades of a banana republic. Yeah. And, it allows people to speculate and to write ridiculous things when we should be, as historians, telling the real story of what happened in the past. And I think part of this is a particular deference to the royal family, who are allowed to get away with almost literally murder because of the freedom of information exemptions. This is all coming home to roost with Prince Andrew.
And we'll speak about that, because I think you're now going to write about Prince Andrew. But the reason why I was doing that long-winded aspect, which I did 2 seconds ago, was basically because I just don't think there's public interest. I mean, that's my problem. I don't think the public care.
Well, I mean, they should care. And I think, the moment will come when hopefully the penny drops. And all we can do is hope that the media does take up these issues, and there is a coordinated response from organizations like Index on Censorship and English Pen and Society of Authors and Royal Historical Society, and all these organizations who should be championing free speech, to lobby the government and to speak out. I think one of the things I found most upsetting about my case was that I was completely isolated. No one spoke up in my favor. No historians went public. And this is a big, someone said to me, because they didn't want to go on the wrong side of the establishment.
Absolutely.
I felt terribly exposed. Both financially, but also in terms of trying to make a stand on what I think is right.
I mean, I've sat there myself, so I know exactly what you're dealing with.
Exactly. You've been a victim of this, I know. And it's appalling the way you were treated.
I mean, and that's my whole fear, because I remember sitting by a young lady on a plane, and she said, I've set my radio up, so if it goes into speech, it'll find another station, because I don't want to hear any news. I know that's an extreme case, but it seems to be where we sit as a nation.
Well, I mean, I think, clearly large segments, but that's why one just needs to keep making the arguments, and hopefully that, incrementally, these stories will build to so much that people will realize that their civil liberties are being eroded. We've seen this over COVID already. But, it is difficult. It's not a vote winner. But, once people start realizing what's going on and how it maybe will affect them, then maybe something will be done. But I think, there's just been a big report by the Public Accounts Committee about the clearinghouse, the way the Cabinet Office coordinates responses to FRO requests, which basically have been criticized because they're slow and they're very disingenuous in their responses. Mm-hmm. which has been my experience. And, the pressure was put on the government to behave responsibly, like a proper government should, and to get its house in order. And all we can do, if the public aren't going to agitate for it, is that for us in the media to just keep making the case and to lobby and to use parliamentarians to affect changes, because otherwise, as I say, it's like living in a banana republic.
I mean, this is another one we hit on, the fourth estate, the media. I mean, again, I've had high-ranking media individuals on this programme, and I fear that they're suggesting that the media isn't what it was. Now, I don't know if that's true, whether it is what it was, but, things like World in Action that could be hard-hitting, Pilger could be hard-hitting, whether you believe in his politics or not, and to some extent, Panorama could have been hard-hitting. It was kind of suggested that isn't the case anymore.
No, I mean, and we see it in publishing. People are frightened because of the libel laws of publishing books. So powerful people are able to basically vent their will. We've seen even the editor of the Telegraph suppress a story about Carrie and the Prime Minister. This is very frightening. The problem is people want to watch Love Island and not want to watch things like Panorama. And it's about the infantilization of this country. I mean, it's really, really worrying. I think there are enough people who care about values and about serious matters that, they just need to speak up. They need to write to their MP. They need to talk, not phone in, but, in a sense, deal with programs like yours to make their views known so that message can get across.
Yeah, I mean, just a very last one on this, in terms of the media. I mean, I noticed Andrew Marr all of a sudden is beginning to speak out a little bit more, not massively, but a little bit more. So why is it correct that Andrew Marr had the flagship programme on the BBC for, 15 years? And wasn't putting forward his views?
He is speaking out.
I mean, how could that happen, though? How could he have the flagship politics show, and now all of a sudden we're seeing what really needs to be said from the same individual when he wasn't saying it before?
Well, I suppose people, worry about pensions or their job. I suspect there's a lot of pressure further up. Think how the BBC covered up the Bashir story.
Sure.
So there's a lot of pressure put on the BBC. I mean, a whole history of this going right back to when Greg Dyke resigned. So I think, good on Marr for speaking now. And let's just hope maybe current BBC journalists will feel that they can speak out. But there is a real problem about whistleblowing in this country. People are prosecuted for
Yes.
telling the truth about things that are wrong.
Yeah.
And we can't have that. I mean, we see it in the National Health Service. We've seen people prosecuted in GCHQ and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, clearly we don't want whistleblowers, but the best way to avoid them is to have a much more open way of dealing with these things so that people don't feel they need to go and become whistleblowers.
I agree. Absolutely agree. So that leads us nicely into what you're now working on, which is another member of the royal family.
Yes, this is the third of this trilogy of studies on unusual royal marriages. So we had Dickie and Edwina Mountbatten, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and now we're going to have the Duke and Duchess of York, the happiest divorced couple ever. And what I'm going to be looking at is it's going to be a full-scale biography. I'm going to look at their upbringing, what shaped them, their careers. I mean, what Prince Andrew was up to in the Navy, but also to look at their charitable activities and whether it's been a cover for money-making activities, and ditto to look at his role as special representative and whether he was lining his own pocket when he was meant to be championing British industry and trade.
Executive, yeah.
So I'm not going to make myself popular again, but I just think that, it's pretty appalling. The royal family have enormous privileges, enormous wealth. And we have plenty of members like the Queen and Prince William and others who are very dedicated public servants who realise their role. But I'm afraid there are a few of these rogue royals that I write about, and we need to shine a light on their activities in the hope that they can be stopped and prevented from behaving like this, anyone else like this in future.
Let me ask you a question, Andrew. Do you think it's because effectively you've only got in every generation one royal that is actually going to mean anything? So you imagine you're the brother of the person who is going to inherit the role. Why would you be above board and play straight when...
I don't buy that. I mean, he's got two siblings, Earl of Wessex and Princess Anne, both of whom do a terrific job in supporting other members of the royal family, and they're not even part of the Streamline group. So, and there are plenty of other members, like the Duke of Gloucester and others, who are doing excellent work, not always in the public eye, and have kept a very discreet lifestyle. And even those outside the royal duties, like Lord Lindley, are not getting them catching themselves out with people like Epstein and being caught trying to sell access to the royal family to fake sheikhs. So, no, I don't believe that for 1 minute. There are a couple of bad apples and they need to be rooted out.
Interesting. Then let me put another version to you of it. I'm just playing devil's advocate on them all. Is it the fact that, you are going to be king, so you've got the title, you're invited everywhere, you are special, but you're that close to them, the others you mentioned are not that close, you're that close to them that you think, I've got what he has, why am I not the person? Why can I not do it? I know obviously Princess Anne could fall into this. Why could I not do it? So therefore, what comes next? The making of money, because money makes everything more palatable.
I mean, what's becoming clear in my Duke of York research is that he was a bully, pompous, and a pain, even as a sort of 5-year-old.
From the beginning, right?
From the beginning. And so his behaviour, his sense of self-entitlement, all these things, it's not helped by the upbringing he had, but it's just part of his character. So you don't see that with Edward or with Anne, or indeed with people like Prince William, who might feel more entitled to it. I think the problem is that both Andrew and Harry got themselves involved with women who were not very good for them, and have brought out the worst characteristics in them rather than bring out the best, which is what I think Kate and Sophie have done.
Interesting. So so you think that the institution itself doesn't create these type of people?
No, I think the institution, and I hope it continues. We've seen at the Jubilee 3 more generations in waiting, but it will only command support when people feel that they are delivering and they are not feathering their own pockets at the expense of the taxpayer. We had this problem with the Eugenie and Beatrice. There were the police protection costs, and you may know more about this than me, were about £500,000 a year. They were getting 24-hour protection. They were undergoing no royal duties. And basically, this was a very sophisticated Uber system, picking them up at nightclubs and taking them home. And the public don't like that, particularly in a time of austerity. I think the bill for royal security is £50 million. What are we getting for our £50 million?
But you see, this is where the problem lies. This is why I'm talking about the institution. If you have the institution, then, of course, you have the problem that suggests this is where the potential for problems might be in terms of their security, and therefore the police will not challenge that request, really, for their security. Well, because nobody wants to fall foul of that, do they?
Well, it was Scotland Yard who had, who were asked to cut the bill, who looked at this and made the representations. So, I mean, I think, too many members of the royal family are protected unnecessarily. And after all, Diana didn't get protection. I mean, you can say that's what caused her death. But, plenty of people don't get protection, and it's been fine. Zara Phillips doesn't get it. No one's tried to kidnap her. There is this culture of secrecy. I'm trying to get a police protection file for the Duke of Windsor from 1932, and it's been closed on the grounds that there may be information in this file that would jeopardize the present security of the royal family, because techniques haven't changed in almost 100 years.
That's not true.
It's ludicrous.
That's not true at all.
Exactly. So, this is the sort of completely mindless deference that we see. and it angers people and actually forces them to actually behave, to become whistleblowers.
But that's what I'm suggesting, Matt, Andrew, insofar as this. Let's take the commissioner, okay? She's now just gone. And she's under fire for whatever, for general policing. Does she really want to add to that, being under fire with the royal family? I don't think she would. And that's where the problem lies. It's yes, we all know the police are meant to be independent and meant to have an independent role on making decisions on operational policing. Absolutely. However, the problem is that many people want to make it to the top. And many have made it to the top by being deferential to the system. Well, that's how they've made it.
I agree. The police and the army and everything intelligence services have become politicized, and it's the yes men who get on. Yeah. And those who, in a sense, are more challenging of this, who are passed by for promotion, and that's always been the case. So I understand the problem, but that's why those in authority need to act responsibly and not basically just have a group of yes men who support what they do. And again, this is the importance of transparency. If these things are much more open, people feel they can come forward, or we can at least have an open debate, then I think it's less likely that there are these funny deals behind the scenes. Mm. And there's a big role here for parliamentarians, and I think parliamentarians aren't stepping up to the mark. They do not press on these issues because, again, as you say, it's easier to stand by and get the honours coming to them rather than to do what is their job, which is to hold the executive to account.
And this is another one of the problems, isn't it? The executive is becoming more and more powerful as we speak, and the legislature is oftentimes being totally forgotten. The oven-ready Northern Irish deal example. We don't want to give you legislature a vote on this issue, and then what do we have? Half a day. And now we have them turning around saying it's the worst thing that's ever been done. So, because there's been no insight into it. But how can that happen that the executive can tell the legislature, this is what's going on, this is what's going to happen, and the legislature stands there and does nothing? You see, the whole system is, I fear, crumbling.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you. And that's why it's important that we take a stand now before the whole thing crumbles totally. And all one can do is, keep whistling in the wind. But all these things are dismissed, inquiries. I mean, I think it's appalling that the powers of patronage that prime ministers have and that they can ignore the advice of independent regulators in the way they do.
Absolutely.
And we all profess to be shocked, and then we go back to watching Love Island.
I take it Love Island's not your favourite programme, Andrew.
It's not. I haven't watched it, but whatever it's going to be. But there is this trivialization of politics at the moment, and I think a lot of, I suppose, the seriousness seems to have gone from politics because a lot of the people are not serious people who are involved in it.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a question on that? By the way, I mean, it appears to me to be the case, and I may be totally wrong. But when I look back at something like the Daily Mirror of the 1970s, early 70s, late 60s, I thought that was quite a political newspaper. Yes, it had its bent, left-leaning, but I think it had political news in it. I think today you'd be hard-pressed to see any. Would you agree with that?
Well, that's true of a lot of the tabloids, absolutely. People getting information from online, I hope from things like the BBC site, but there are just so many ways of gathering information. And as you say, people want to listen to the music rather than hear the news. Yeah. So, but then, you have moments, moments of national crisis when people do watch the news. Mm-hmm. And listen to the radio. So I just hope that that will come back a bit more. That people will be aware of the importance of being active democratic citizens.
Now, in where you are now presently, in terms of how you see the way forward for yourself, has this sort of malaise changed how you write, or are you still writing the same things?
No, I've changed enormously. I started off writing travel books on Edinburgh and biographies of literary biography. But I think I have begun to now write books which are about the establishment cover-ups. We had the cover-up of the Guy Burgess and the Cambridge spy ring. Mm-hmm. We had the cover-up of the German documents with the Duke of Windsor. And I think we've got the cover-up of the Duke of York now with his behavior. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people are not prepared to speak to me for whatever reason. I think they're just worried. But, you know, there is a lot of stuff that was going on as the Duke was special representative, which was wrong. Yeah. He was doing his own private business on government time or playing golf. You know, we do need to hold not just the executive to account, but the monarchy to account.
Yes.
Because we spend a lot of money on them. And, you know, if they are to survive, they have to show that they are worth the money we're spending.
Yeah. I mean, presently, you see the balances that they are worth it. That's your present stance.
Yes, I'm a monarchist. I want it to continue, and I would like to get rid of these bad apples and leave it to the ones who do the job, because these bad apples give them a bad name.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of what you'd write after this book, it would be something completely different, or you would still be challenging the state as such?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I've been totally bankrupted with all my cases and be completely demoralized, and I'll go off and maybe, write something about Love Island.
Absolutely. But seriousness aside, I think that there are still enough people out there who want to know what has gone on. And I think maybe even the Channel 4 programme, which I haven't seen yet, will show you that there are still people and stations that want to put things on that are of interest.
Yes, and actually, interestingly enough, the Channel 4 documentary got their highest ratings ever, and that's why they repeated it quite quickly.
Right, brilliant.
So there is an educated audience out there who do want to know these things and have an open mind too for revisionist history, which is what I do. So that is hopeful.
Brilliant. I mean, I would hope that you stay at it, not least because I'd like to have you back on again to discuss some of the issues, because I'm going to try and keep this one down to 35 for obvious reasons that I've been going over past that time in the last few episodes. And you may or may not know that I did quite a harrowing one on a young lady who had a very difficult life. But the point I'm making here now, back into the world of secret intelligence and national security, is that I would argue that the one big thing we need to look at, somebody like you needs to look at, is how the whole apparatus works.
Yes, I agree. It's a very good question. We do need to have a big overview of the intelligence services and their role. Again, it's this problem of access. It can only really be written by an insider or someone who has cooperation from people in the know. Yeah. But I think, ironically, MI5 have been one of the government departments which has been most open to revealing material. And the Cabinet Office, who's responsible for overseeing FOIO, has been the worst. But I agree, there's some good books still to be done. And I hope between us, we will do them or we can persuade others to do them.
Yeah, I think it's a hell of a persuasion job if we manage to do that, for the pure and simple reason that obviously agencies choose what sets them in a good light. And as we know today, you can't afford to make mistakes that are open. So, they are played around with, so we don't get the true picture. Now, I think the only way we help ourselves in this nation, my view, is that we actually look at this whole thing, warts and all, and then set ourselves up correctly. There is a need for secret intelligence. There is a need for national security operations. You do need to keep an eye on individuals. I mean, it's real, it's securing the nation. The question is, the nation needs to then be informed why you've done it. And I think that's where we miss out, from my perspective. I think people in the nation don't understand why action happens now or why they happened in the past. And the other thing is that I massively dislike is you can't take today's view on past events. So you've got to take into account the timeframes of the events that went by. So you can say, example, with the traitor king, he was a traitor to the United Kingdom. That's a given. But you can't turn around and say, in the period of the Cold War, certain aspects were done to prevent Soviet Warsaw Pact infiltration that would not be done today because that threat isn't the same. So it's got to be educated, is what I'm saying. Would you
exactly.
agree with that?
I mean, I think that's why the more debate we have in the open, the better, so that everyone can join the debate, and hopefully we decide on the right path how to deal with these things rather than just suppress them, put them under the carpet.
Yeah. I think suppression is one of the things we do very well. Andrew, we're coming to an end. So I'd just like to ask you, what is it that you would like to say?
Well, I mean, thank you very much for having me on the program. It's always very good to chat with you. We always cover a wide range of subjects. I hope that people will want to read and buy Traitor King, and indeed the Mountbattens and the Prince Andrew, which is due out in about 2 years' time. Right. And that they get involved with some of these issues. There's something called the Campaign for Freedom of Information, which, for example, is campaigning at the moment for transparency of procurement deals. We saw a lot of rather dodgy deals going on with PPE. And, become much more engaged citizens in the democracy because, we, after all, this is what Ukraine is fighting for the right to be a free nation and to make their own decisions and to be free. And I think it's been a salutary lesson to us that, our liberties can easily be challenged and we need to stand up for them or they'll be lost.
I'll leave you with this thought. I won't name the name of the journalists, but there are two journalists on a relatively late night program on Sky, and they were watching the German debates, and they said, yeah, German debates, okay, for Bundeskanzler, okay, but there's nothing exciting about it. And I thought to myself, it's not meant to be a game. It's not meant to be exciting. It's meant to be informative. It's meant to inform their citizens what they suggest they will do. And what they were referring to was that the two candidates weren't at each other's throats enough. And
well,
that seems
we have an adversarial system, and I
Absolutely.
agree we need more joined up and grown up behaviour. But one can be aware of the problem, and once one's aware of it, hopefully one can address it.
Yeah. And I think that's what it requires. So, Andrew, thank you very much for your time once again.
A pleasure.
That was fantastic. Absolutely, likewise. And hopefully we'll have you back a third time, sometime before you've created your latest masterpiece, which I hope you can get through without a lot of, let's say, redactions, because I think maybe something might happen down that route, do you think?
I think there'll be a lot of redactions, a lot cut by the lawyers.
Right, okay. Well, Andrew, thank you very much. And we'll see you again next time.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
More than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.